The day I found out my mom had been stealing my identity since I was 10. I threw up. I was 22 years old, sitting in a bank, trying to open my first real account. The woman behind the desk went quiet. She looked at her screen, then at me, then back at her screen. And she said, "Sir, there are 11 accounts already open in your name. The oldest one is from 1999. I was born in 1989. I was 10 years old in 1999. My mom had been building debt in my name for over a decade, and I had no idea." The banker handed me a printout. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely read it. The total amount sitting under my name was not a number a 22-year-old should ever see. Before I tell you what that number was, you need to understand who I was. I grew up in a small house with thin walls and loud arguments. My parents split when I was 7. My dad left and barely looked back. So it was just me and my mom. I was a quiet kid, kept my head down, got decent grades. I didn't cause trouble because I didn't want to give her any more stress than she already had. I genuinely believed I owed her that much. She worked 2 jobs most of my childhood. I watched her come home exhausted, shoes still on, falling asleep on the couch. I admired her for it. I told people my mom was a fighter. I believed that with everything I had. Looking back now, I think I confused survival with honesty. My mom and I were close, genuinely close. I know that sounds strange given everything I'm about to tell you, but it's the truth. She coached my little league team one season because no other parent volunteered. She stayed up until 2 in the morning helping me study for exams. She drove 4 hours round trip to see me graduate community college. I called her every Sunday, every single Sunday. She was the person I called when I got my first job, when I had a bad day, when I just needed someone to talk to. There was nobody else. That's the part that destroys me when I think about it now. She wasn't some distant villain I could easily hate. She was my person. And the whole time, she was quietly doing something in the background that I never thought to look for. There were signs. I just didn't read them. When I was about 16, I tried to get a part-time job that required a background check. My mom talked me out of applying, said the place had a bad reputation. I believed her. When I was 18, a friend mentioned I should start building credit. I told my mom. She changed the subject. Vast. When I was 20, I got a piece of mail addressed to me from a collection agency. My mom grabbed it off the counter before I could open it. Said it was probably junk. Said she'd handle it. I remember thinking that was weird. And then I forgot about it. I forgot about it. That single moment haunts me more than almost anything else, because the answer was right there in my hand. And I let her take it. By the time I was 21, something had shifted. I couldn't name it, but something felt off. I started noticing she got tense whenever money came up. Not sad tense. Defensive tense. There's a difference. I also noticed she never asked me for help with finances, which sounds fine, except she always said she was struggling. But she never let me look at anything. No bills. No statements. Nothing. One night I mentioned I was thinking about buying a used car and would need to check my credit. She laughed it off. Said I was too young to worry about that stuff. I was 21. I thought maybe she was just overprotective. I told myself she'd always handled things for me, and she just hadn't learned to let go. I almost convinced myself that was all it was. Almost. Then came the bank. I walked in to open a simple checking account. I had 2 forms of ID. I had cash for the opening deposit. I was prepared. And then the banker froze. She excused herself. Came back with a supervisor. They were quiet in that very specific way people get quiet when they know something terrible and don't know how to say it. The supervisor slid a printed report across the desk. 11 accounts. Opened over 12 years. Credit cards, personal loans, a store financing account, a payday loan service I'd never heard of. The combined balance across all of them was $47,000, $47,000. In my name. Starting when I was 10 years old. I sat there and I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. My brain kept trying to find another explanation. Any explanation. But there was only one name on every single account. Mine. And only one person who could have put it there. I drove to her house that same evening. I don't remember most of the drive. I knocked on her door instead of using my key. She opened it smiling. That smile disappeared the moment she saw my face. I put the papers on her kitchen table. I didn't say anything. I just watched her look at them. She went pale. And then she did something I did not expect. She didn't deny it. She sat down, put her head in her hands, and said, "I was going to pay it all back before you ever needed it." Those exact words. Like she'd rehearsed them. Like she'd been waiting for this conversation for years. I told her I needed her to explain every single account. Every single dollar. She cried through the whole thing. And I sat there completely still, because I had learned something in that kitchen I could not unlearn. The weeks after that conversation were the darkest of my life. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat properly. I went over every memory of my childhood and looked for the lie inside it. The late nights she worked was that guilt. The time she was generous with me was that compensation. I started questioning everything. Every gift. Every hug. Every Sunday phone call. I felt like the ground had disappeared. Like I'd been standing on something solid my whole life, and I looked down one day and there was nothing there. My credit score was wrecked. I couldn't rent an apartment in my own name. I couldn't get approved for a phone plan. I was 22 years old, and financially, I didn't exist in any clean way. The person who was supposed to protect me had used me as a tool. For 12 years. And the worst part, I still loved her. I hated myself for it. About 6 weeks after the bank visit, I woke up one morning and something had shifted. I'm not sure what changed overnight. But I looked at the ceiling and I thought, she doesn't get to take the next 12 years too. She already took the first ones. She doesn't get the rest. That was the thought. Simple. Clear. I got up. I made coffee. I sat at my table with a notepad, and I wrote down every account on that report. Every balance. Every date it was opened. Then I wrote down 2 words at the top of the page. Fix it. I didn't know exactly how yet. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't have money. I barely had a functioning credit identity. But I had something she didn't count on. I had the truth. And I had every document to prove it. I spent the next 2 months doing research. Every night after work. I learned what an identity theft affidavit was. I learned how to file disputes with all 3 credit bureaus. I learned that what my mother had done was not just a moral violation. It was a federal crime. I contacted a non-profit credit counseling service. They helped me understand what documentation I needed and in what order. I ordered my full credit reports, highlighted every fraudulent account, photographed everything. I also quietly consulted with a legal aid attorney. She explained my options, all of them, including the ones I wasn't sure I was willing to use. I didn't tell my mom any of this. We still talked on Sundays. Those conversations were the hardest thing I've ever done. Keeping my voice steady. Keeping it normal. Waiting. And then, The first letter arrived at her house. That letter was from the Federal Trade Commission. I had filed a formal identity theft report. And once I did that, the legal process started moving whether my mom cooperated or not. Within 3 months, 8 of the 11 fraudulent accounts had been formally disputed and flagged. The credit bureaus removed them from my report. My score moved from non-existent to a real number. Then came the second wave. 3 of the creditors, the ones with the largest balances, pursued legal action against the person who actually opened those accounts. My mother. Not me. Her. She called me crying. Said she was getting letters from lawyers. Said she didn't understand what was happening. And I told her calmly that I had filed every report I was legally entitled to file. That I was sorry it had come to this. But I was not sorry I did it. The total debt that was transferred back to her name was $31,000. She had to enter a repayment plan. Her credit was destroyed. She finally understood what 12 years of that felt like. Today my credit is real. It's mine. I own it. I have an apartment in my name. A car loan I got approved for on my own. A credit card with a limit that reflects who I actually am, not the wreckage she built. My mom and I don't have a normal relationship. Maybe we never will again. I've had to accept that loving someone and trusting someone are not the same thing. They were never the same thing. I was just too young and too loyal to see the difference. What I want you to take from this is simple. Check your credit. Even if you're young. Especially if you're young. You are never too early to know what's in your name, because the one person you assume would never touch it is sometimes exactly the one who does. I was 10 years old when this started. Nobody checked. Nobody caught it. Not until I walked into that bank 12 years later, and the whole thing finally came apart. If this story hit you the way I think it might have, drop a comment below. Tell me, could you have caught this earlier? Or would you have missed the signs too? I genuinely want to know. And if this video moved you at all, please hit like and subscribe to Dossier Karma. It costs you nothing. It means everything to this channel. I read your comments, every one of them, and I'll see you in the next one.